I ran into Vern Broders at the Union League Club this week in downtown Chicago. Vern was a guest for lunch with a member who was trying to recruit Vern as a new member. I told Vern it's such a wonderful club. There's almost no need to join because there's always an invitation to terrific programs and events. The Union League Club had its best year ever with record catering sales and new young members joining. Later, someone asked me if I had asked Vern what he thought of everything that had happened at Worth Pres. I certainly did not. I never asked anybody, although many people came to me with many of the same concerns and issues that I shared with the clerk of session, head of personnel, and clergy. In the bookshop at the Union League Club, they have the book outlining the history of the club titled Glory, Darkness, Light. It's not an entirely flattering story. We all need to face our own demons. None of us want to be a bad person. Being in relationships sometimes means asking the difficult questions. Next time I have the chance, I'm going to ask, what does Vern Broders think? Welcome. Welcome to Sunday Coffee Hour. I'm Stanley Smith. At Sunday Coffee Hour, we talk about everything and nothing. This Sunday, we talked about managing pain well, looking for a new opioid, about not leaving the house because it's too cold, and about how now, due to inflation, the best things in life are no longer free. The readings at Washington National Cathedral were from Samuel. Someone's always calling us, but we're often the last ones to know. And from Corinthians, there's a difference between what's lawful and what's legal. The gospel reading was, we're looking for God in all the wrong places. The sermon at Washington National Cathedral was from Andrew Young. Mr. Young preached about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the sweeping history and legacy of his ministry from Atlanta to Chicago to Washington, D.C. Mr. Young said that we've all bought into the community and tradition of God's legacy simply by coming to this church because we're sharing in communion and community. Martin Luther King's message was about nonviolence, peace, and calm, that his life was anything but peace and calm. Mr. Young told the story of a time he and Martin Luther traveled in Atlanta, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. He said Chicago probably had more Black people living there than in the South. Mr. Young said that Dr. King realized that nonviolence wasn't really working because he encountered increasingly more violence wherever he went. Mr. Young was there when the assassin's bullet took off the end of Mr. King's chin and lodged in the top of his spine, killing him instantly. He said it's very likely that he never knew what happened and that he didn't experience any pain or suffering. Mr. Young said that he doesn't believe in the rapture, but if anyone ever received a flaming chariot directly to heaven, it was Dr. Martin Luther King in that moment. Mr. Young said that before he died, Mr. King was turning to the idea that economics was the driver of oppression more than racism or any fundamental difference. They were formulating the idea of tourism to end conflict here and in the Middle East. Mr. Young said that the Vietnam War and the conflict in the Middle East were major distractions from a message of our shared humanity. It's hard to advocate for peace when there's a conversation going on subverting the message with war and violence. We all want peace, but we've all been trained to expect war and violence before we can get there. We've all bought into the economics of that. Rules and compliance is for the government. We weren't out to get Dr. Martin Luther King, but the government was. At St. James Cathedral, Lisa preached about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She said his birth coincides with the secular calendar and the celebration of Martin Luther King Day. But on the church calendar, the Episcopal Church calendar, they celebrate his All Saints' Day in April on the date of his death. A couple of weeks ago, Stephen Balke told us that we don't really fear death as much as we fear not having enough time to complete all that we need to complete in this lifetime. Lisa said Dr. Martin Luther King completed what he needed to complete by the time of his death because he was surrounded by people hearing his message. Lisa asked us to imagine Dr. Martin Luther King speaking at the Lincoln Memorial to an empty plaza, because it takes a community to hear prophetic message. We lament the lack of prophetic voice in our time. It's possible there are voices out there, but we're simply not inclined to be hearing them. Sometimes it takes someone to point that out to us, to point it out to us exactly who it is that's speaking to us. And sometimes we need to hear ourselves complain about it as a way to hear it. But Lisa didn't say that because she offered us that opportunity, the opportunity for our silent narrator to figure that out. As the camera panned the sanctuary during Lisa's sermon, the sanctuary was practically empty. The general lack of attendance combined with the extreme cold. Lisa started off by describing Dr. Martin Luther King as a voice, a leader, and a citizen. He wasn't a political leader or a bureaucrat. He was a person who was chosen to be a spokesperson for a community who didn't really know they were a community. And he was the leader without really knowing that he was their leader. Sometimes it takes someone else to see the community, to see the leader, and to hear the message and see it as an opportunity and not as a threat. Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated for being an enemy of the state. Dr. Martin Luther King wasn't speaking to an empty sanctuary, but if he was, it would be on us and not him, because we always have the opportunity to be there, even when there's low attendance and even on the coldest day. In many analysis of Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind, commentators describe the work as highly problematic. The character of Scarlett O'Hara is dissected as being on the spectrum between being histrionic and being a complete psychopath. She is the embodiment of racism and white supremacy. Using a woman to illustrate the oppression of others is such a terrific distraction. Analysis reveals that everyone in the book is racist, including the Black people. In the story of the Union League Club, the early history of the club revolves around the debate whether the club would be restricted or not. Of course, that debate took place against the backdrop of the club being a men's club only. In the story of Gone with the Wind, it's a story about the end of a civilization. And you have to give people credit for being somewhere, wherever they are on the spectrum. Margaret Mitchell said Scarlett O'Hara had instincts stronger than reason, knowledge born of experience, and burdens that were her own, with the resolve to bear them. Later in the day at the Union League Club, someone I worked with for many years asked me what I thought about Fourth Pres. She said that she and her family could see the body language of the congregation tense up whenever the sermon was about to begin. Of course, I never noticed that, I told her, because I was at St. James. We've all been through a shared bad experience. My friend Annie Gramone says we can't just focus on the positive because then we miss out on the full experience of life. Because we're physical beings, we experience everything first as a physical feeling sensation. Sometimes we're joy-filled, and at other times, the congregation tenses up. None of us want to be a bad person or point out the obvious, but sometimes it's the kindest thing to do. My Hindu friend says everyone in India is Hindu, regardless of what God they believe in. In America, everyone is Christian, regardless of what they believe, because it's part of our civilization. We have the starting point of freedom and being created equal in this country. And in that, we're all white, regardless of what race we are. Over the holidays, my friend Alex got 2 pet birds. He names them Butterfly and Pinkerton. In the opera Madama Butterfly, we don't need to be in Butterfly's shoes to know and appreciate her pain and suffering. On Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we don't need to be in his shoes either. We identify with empathy and compassion, and then one fine day. If you would like to join us at Sunday Coffee Hour is every Sunday at 12 noon Central Time on Zoom. I will include my email in the description of this video. I'll be happy to send you an invitation. And I look forward to seeing you very, very soon.